Is there anything remarkable about your life that stopped someone in their tracks to ask, "You're different. You don't seem like others. Why?" Honor Christ and let Him be the Lord of your life. Always be ready to give an answer when someone asks you about your hope. When was the last time you had to give an answer for your hope? When the Apostle Paul started a collection for the starving brothers and sisters in Jerusalem, his appeal was met with amazing generosity by the Macedonian believers living almost 1,000 miles away. Paul describes their incredible response because he wants the Corinthians to follow their astonishing example. And he wants everyone to see how God's grace energizes Christ's followers to give any and every act of love. And now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. An interviewer comes from Corinth. He reads Paul's letter and travels north to find out more. He finds a Macedonian believer who is happy to talk about what happened.
You responded to Paul's call for contributions by giving everything, even when you had nothing to start with. Paul says you gave more than you were able. That's very generous, but isn't it also reckless? What were you thinking?
Yes, we're dirt poor, and a few of us had to sell some things to find the money. And to make things worse, we were suffering for our faith. It was a scary time, to be sure. At first, some of us worried about taking such a huge risk. I have a young family. But then someone said, Jesus has already taken away our risk. If there is no condemnation, if we are set right with God, if we don't have to fear that He will pounce on us every time we fail, then there is simply no reason to be afraid, no reason not to act. What can we lose? Jesus has removed every reason to fear for the future. Knowing that frees you. You're free to give yourself in acts of love. And when we live like that, we become what Jesus tells us to be. The salt of the earth, the beacon on a hill. Grace is so liberating. It completely changed the way we looked at our money, how little we had, how to get more, how much others had. Those worries no longer controlled us. And we found this amazing calm. Yes, a real peace, even though the beatings didn't stop and we were still very hard up. What we felt, and Paul put it well, was an abundance of joy to give. I suppose you could call our response excessive, but we have received extravagant grace. So, Paul never twisted our arms to give. That's because we had learned a priceless truth. Grace frees you to take risks.
Paul obviously wanted to tell us Corinthians about your generous acts of kindness. You should have seen us. We gasped open-mouthed when we heard. You blazed a trail, but that kind of puts a lot of pressure on us to follow.
Well, Paul puts it a bit differently, I think. It is not our generosity that's on display here. It's God's grace that is at work through us. So God didn't stand back and watch how we would react. Paul says grace was given to all the churches in our region. He came to us and gave us grace. Extraordinary grace, overflowing grace. That's what Paul wants Corinth and the rest of the world to know about. When we saw God working through us, we all realized that our joy doesn't depend on the persecution stopping or us getting rich. True joy is not rooted in that. No. Our joy, it comes from giving whatever we have. Because God, in His grace, has given us so much. Our generosity didn't stem from our own goodness. It came from above. Paul calls our giving an act of grace. Not once, but twice. So it wasn't us. God was at work in us to release a radical, loving response in our hearts.
Well, the funds got to Jerusalem and to the brothers and sisters safely. What else do you think did taking this risk accomplish? How has it changed you?
I'm not naturally brave. My first thought was, I can't do this, God. Please find somebody else. I might be able to give if you sort out the beatings and our lack of money. Besides, we don't even know these people in Jerusalem. But Paul was asking us to look outside our own selfish world and show love to the poor in that city. It was a tough question for me as I looked at my kids. Would I do it? But then I realized if I did nothing, if I turned away, I'd be wasting my life. When people look at my life and what I do, I want them to see one thing, that God is everything to me in Jesus. God's purpose for me, for all of us, is to glorify Him. Here's how I would say it. I want to make God look great in all I do. My life, your life, they're not our own. We were made for God's glory, to make Him look magnificent. That's why we're here. When we gave that money, our little church was filled with joy. We truly wanted to copy Jesus and help others. You know, when things like that happen, people do take notice. God wants us to put Him on display by the way we live. And if you live to give Him glory, others will see Him in you.
Is it a wonder if no one asks us about our hope? If there is no salt, no light in our lives, why would they? We waste our lives afraid of losing control. We hold on to our life tightly gripping what we vainly believe we can control. We hoard our money, hoard our time, and then we just end up hiding in plain sight. We become just like everyone around us. Average, prosperous, contented. We have our eyes on our paycheck or our retirement funds, not on Jesus. What kind of lifestyle will move people to ask you questions about your hope? Gathering money? No, they'll assume money is your hope. Gathering comforts? That says comforts are your hope. Spending all your time planning your next vacation? That says leisure is your hope. If you live like that, no one has any reason to ask you anything. To inspire curiosity in others takes a radical, countercultural lifestyle, loving to the utmost, giving more than you have, forgiving when hearts are cold. Grace is liberating. It gives you the space to take risks, to do astonishing things that will make the world sit up and see the supreme glory of God. God's grace freed these early Greek believers to find their joy in His grace, not their goods, in His mercy, not their money. And acts of grace like these, where we see God working through them and us to show love to others. These are beautiful pointers, not to ourselves, but to our Father. Don't waste your life. Make it a platform to show God as glorious, valuable, praiseworthy, and that you treasure Him above all else. That will get the world's attention.